to sell more restaurants than anyone else, period. And you can't do that if you morph over here and there and say, oh, well, there's this great car wash opportunity, and here's a great, beauty, wellness kind of a business.
Yeah.
You really had to have the discipline. And it's been absolutely the best possible thing we can do because it's given us so much market share nationwide. I mean, we are selling a tremendous number of all transactions that occur in America today, resales. We don't do any new franchise sales. And so while brokers are fighting for market share and trying to be a little bit of everything to everyone, we simply own that online digital space for restaurants. So if you look up, how do you buy a restaurant? How do you sell a restaurant? If you ask AI, who can assist me in buying or selling a restaurant? Our business model has delivered that result that says we absolutely own that.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Welcome back for another franchise conversation. I'm John Hayes, and my guest today is well known throughout franchising, particularly through the International Franchise Association, but through her professional affiliations as well. She's a certified franchise executive with the International Franchise Association, a certified business intermediary, longtime leader within the IFA itself, former chair of the IFA Women's Franchise Committee, an IFA board member, and an industry advocate. She's regularly quoted in franchise and restaurant media, has written extensively on franchise resales, restaurant valuations, acquisitions, and industry trends. This is going to be a conversation about buying and selling restaurants for the most part. My guest, Robin Gagnon, co-founder with her husband, and she's the CEO of We Sell Restaurants. Robin, thank you for making the time to join me.
Oh, John, thrilled to be here, and thank you. I'm passionate about this topic, as you can imagine, so Can't wait to get into it.
Good, great. So, how come people want to sell restaurants? They do all the time. You're at the center of it. Talk about that. Let's start there.
Well, there wouldn't be a market to sell your restaurant if there wasn't an incredible market to buy a restaurant, right? And so I credit this gentleman named Bobby Flay and the Food Network that came along in the late 90s because they sure made restaurants sexy, right? And now you can't turn on the TV without thinking about what would it be like to be a chef of my own? What would it be like to have total domain over this kitchen and make people happy? So I think, part of it is those societal influences. I think the other part is, John, listen, we've become so disconnected. You and I have met in person many times, but so many people feel like the last place they can go and really share a conversation, sit across the table from someone, break bread, and have a glass of wine is in the restaurant business. It's not going anywhere. It just keeps growing.
Yeah. And Bobby Flay certainly has had an impact on franchises and owning restaurants and being a chef and running restaurants. In fact, I read recently he was trying to be, and maybe he is the highest paid Food Network celebrity, but Guy Fieri apparently is $100 million personality on that network. He has a house here in West Palm Beach. I've tried to get him involved with the Titus Center and to talk about franchising and to work with our students, but I don't have the money to pay him to come over and talk. I wish he would decide to come drop in one day, as we've had so many other people do. And he was recently did a Cuban restaurant here in West Palm Beach, so that'll be on the air soon. So I'm wondering, for every 10 restaurants that you offer for sale, how many of those are going to be a situation where the franchisee is 82 years old and says, I love what I do, but I'm tired of doing it, or maybe only 72 years old, or maybe 62 years old. In other words, they want to retire. That's why they're going to leave the restaurant business.
I would say a good third of the folks who are exiting the restaurant business are because they are getting older. You know, we have this phenomenon that started maybe 7-8 years ago called the silver tsunami, where more people are retiring. I think it's 10,000 baby boomers per day are returning 65. And the interesting thing about those baby boomers is their children have all gone out to be well educated and do very, very well and are not interested in taking over the family business. So that's pushing more inventory onto the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's funny, that silver tsunami, which I definitely am a part of in more than one way. And I have a statistic. I tell my students at the beginning of every semester, I'm a baby boomer. 10,000 of us die every minute. If I drop over in the classroom, just call 911. Don't be concerned. It's just my turn.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. They get a kick out of it as well. And they can't believe that this year I'll be telling them I'm 77 years old. So they're that's their grandparents. They figure it out pretty fast. You know, he's not just old enough to be my father.
77 years young, John.
Yeah, exactly.
You have such a passion for life.
I definitely feel that way. So then, if a third of them, and I figured, you know, they're retiring. They've worked hard enough. This is time to move on. And maybe they own 20 units or 3 units or 300 units, as we have some franchisees who do that. But how many of them are broke? It didn't work out, and the restaurant failed for whatever reason, but it's for sale. And oftentimes, as I know from so many of my guests who look for failed opportunities to buy in franchising. Dunkin', for example, I have a Dunkin' podcast with a guest that he's got the formula. And if you just give him some basic numbers about your Dunkin', he'll know whether it's successful or not, and he'll know whether he wants to go for it and buy it or not. That's fabulous.
Right, absolutely. So I would say we're in the same ballpark. We're about a third are that turnaround scenario, which means there's nothing wrong with the concept. There's nothing wrong with the location. They are what we call an asset sale. They're ready for someone to come in and turn around that opportunity. And most of the time, you know, we've been in this business a long time. It's one of 2 or 3 things. You've got to raise sales, which is always the cure for everything, or you have to manage those expense lines, right? You have to manage food, you have to manage labor, and if you're stuck in a lease that's too high, there's not much you can do except raise sales to get yourself into a decent occupancy cost.
Yeah. So I've had, I do have a regular guest, a Cuban entrepreneur who is here in the United States, originally was in Mexico before. And maybe he's not Cuban. He may be Mexican. Yeah. I have lots of Cuban professionals here in West Palm Beach who come and spend time in the classroom. But this fellow, Guillermo, I'm pretty sure, Mexican family. He owned, I always hate to say, but a big fast feeder that everybody knows. And he had about 10 of them, but he was being pinched not only by the franchisor, American-based company, but just by the economy as well. And at one point, he had to sell the restaurants, loved running restaurants, and went on in America to have other, he got into a juice franchise as well, owned 17 of those some years ago. So he comes in with a roll of pennies. And he'll say to my students, well, he'll come in with $1 worth. I think that's probably 2 rolls of pennies. If they're going to be rolls of pennies. I don't know what he's going to do. He'll have to go to dimes whenever we don't have pennies anymore. And he unravels those rolls and he stacks them up in front of the students. And he'll say, all right, here's how things work in the restaurant business. You've got labor costs and whatever that is, 20, 30%. You've got to put, yeah. Set 3 pennies aside. You've got food costs, you've got the lease, you've got royalties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it gets down to where he's got a penny or 2 left in some scenarios. So he's not against being in food business or restaurant business, but his message is you've got to be careful. You have to make sure that you're going to be able to make a good living at doing this because it's hard work. But today, it seems to me that getting into the restaurant business is really taking an extra risk because of inflation and food costs, the price of chicken, the price of beef, the price of vegetables. How do you know there's going to be any money left for you at the end of the day?
Well, I am passionate about franchising, and you and I met through the franchise model. And the great thing about the franchise model is that you are able to leverage the buying power of a very large group rather than just going to the supplier and saying, hey, sell it to me at this kind of pricing. Someone's able to go there and they're negotiating for 100 units or 400 units or 500 units. So franchises can be very, very successful in managing supply chain and managing costs for their franchisees to really offset what would be a very turbulent kind of a situation.
Mm-hmm. And that falls right into my next question. Some restaurant brands have healthier resale markets because of their success and maybe the desire for that kind of a brand. And I don't mind if you mention brands, but I don't promote brands very much necessarily. That's not what I do. I'm talking about the issues related to franchise business in general. But which brands have the healthiest resale markets?
So it's interesting, John, because it can be very cyclical, right? We went through a period of time, so during COVID, we had so many people, they all wanted the pizza brands, right? Because pizza was doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
There is this huge affinity right now for chicken. So things go in and out of style, right? So chicken brands, people love chicken brands. Almost any national franchise does very, very well. But certain ones, like they come in with a bang, like Juice Concepts or Bubba Tea Concepts or things like that, and then they kind of fade out with a whimper. So it depends on what kind of stability there is over time. It also depends on what is that brand doing to reinvent itself, right? Mm-hmm. Like you think about Tropical Smoothie Cafe 10 years ago was truly just tropical smoothies, and they've morphed and they've adapted and they've become a brilliant operator and extended that healthy food concept into true cafe-like food, taking AUVs up. So it depends on the brand itself and the cycle it's in its life cycle. And then it's also interesting when certain brands sell. Like I remember when Firehouse first got that $1 billion valuation many years ago, it was like that rising tide would raise all boats. Then individual Firehouse units weren't worth any more really, but there was greater demand and interest at the single investor market for 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, just because someone had just paid $1 billion for the brand, which RBI did. So I would tell you it's not a single brand, it's not a series of brands. It can be very much related to the life cycle of the brand and the trending, where we are in America. And think about yogurt. Our brand is 25 years old this year. We sold a lot of yogurt stores 20 years ago, but not the same thing today, right? They came in and out of favor quickly.
Right. I was part of that because my client was I Can't Believe It's Yogurt based in Dallas. They were fabulous. Low cost. People loved operating them. People loved going to them. But the day that McDonald's decided to put what they called frozen yogurt into their machines, like 10,000 of them units overnight, that was the end of the I Can't Believe It's yogurts, because who wants to pay $3-4 for yogurt and the toppings when you can go to McDonald's and get supposedly yogurt for $1, but that yogurt was a mix that was powdered that I Can't Believe It's yogurt had live yogurt cultures in the yogurt. It was a great product, but that went away. And then, of course, the sour yogurt came back. Yogurt reinvented itself. It's still out there, and I see 16 Handles. They've been my guest, and they seem to be doing well. I see them here in West Palm Beach. Now, you also mentioned pizza, and I found that interesting because, we say, and for years we've been saying this, I don't know if this number is true or not, and because there's no Department of Franchising, and I'm not suggesting there should be one, one. We don't know how many franchise brands we have in America for sure, and we don't know the categorization. So we say, well, there's 400 new brands coming on a year, but we have been saying that there are 4,000 brands in America every year for, I don't know, the last 20 years. Used to be only 2,000 brands. We got up to 4,000. But if there's 400 new ones every year, there must be 400 disappearing if we stay at 4,000. And of those 400, maybe 20 or 30 are pizza brands. Mm-hmm. Do we really need more pizza in America?
Oh, well, our waistlines would say no, but our passion for that, hot, sticky, gooey, cheesy, crispy crust, what's better on a Friday night? You've had a long week and you order a pizza and have a nice glass of wine.
Yes. But is there a point? And, this is America. We believe in free enterprise. Franchising certainly supports free enterprise. It enhances free enterprise. So we can have as many pizza brands as somebody would like to create. But do we get to a point of saturation where we say there's so many pizza brands, not any one can stand out and make a lot of money over and over and over because there's so many opportunities. Not suggesting that we say, okay, no more pizza, we don't need any more. I mean, that's not the way America works. But is it a detriment to people who do have pizza brands and other brands that are similarly popular and not that expensive? Does it, there's only so much money in the neighborhood that can be spent on pizza, and if there are too many pizza shops, nobody's going to get ahead. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a very fair point. I think that what pizza and what pizza brands are trying to do, and it really applies to any franchise brand, is you have to find that point of differentiation. You can't live in that muddled middle ground that's the same as everyone else. Either your price point has to be unique, your methodology has to be unique, the product in some way has to stand out. Do you put cheese in your crust? Do you deliver in a certain amount of time? Like, whatever it is, but you must have a point of differentiation that tells the consumer, because otherwise you will just be lost in the mix. You just becomes transactional at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the things, stuffing cheese here and there, there's only so much you can do, and it's also at a certain point you say, I really don't care where they stuff the cheese. I just want a great tasting pizza for a fair price, maybe delivered in 2 minutes. Right. So that makes it difficult for people to compete, particularly in that niche.
And I spoke with a gentleman this week, and he has he started his first pizza restaurant. He's doing about $1.7 million in sales, and he is dropping a lot of money to the bottom line. And then he expanded with 2 other units, and he did them he built them out, then he put someone in place, and now they're paying him back and paying him a licensing fee. He wants to build himself up to being a franchisor. And what I said to him, John, is, listen, I think that obviously the results you've delivered so far are phenomenal. You have something that's working very, very well in that market. But to be franchisable, you now have to learn a whole new skill set. Yeah. You're no longer going to be in the restaurant business. You're going to have to learn how to be a franchisor. And so I recommended to him that first and foremost, he register and attend the Emerging Franchise Conference. Yeah. That's going to be in, I believe it's in Nashville this year in November. And I said, you need to educate yourself, because you have to learn an entire new industry, how to be a franchisor. And you're going to be modeling very different costs as a Zor than you are as someone who is operating a food concept. And then you have to test it, right? You have to test it. Does this same size concept work? Does it work in a booming metropolis the same way it works in rural America? When you've got, 40 pizza restaurants within a 2-mile radius, what are you going to do to stand out? There is a tremendous amount of competition in almost every single industry. So how are you going to be the one that says, I'm different enough, put your money with me?
In these scenarios where somebody creates a concept and they're operating it. They're making a lot of money. Other people say to them, hey, can I open one of these? Are you franchised? Well, no, we're not a franchise. But then they create a scenario or an opportunity for a licensing fee. And some of these folks, many of them, will be in the food in restaurant industry, and so they're likely to come to you, like this gentleman who we just talked about did, to say, how do I become a franchisor? Do you find in any of those cases they're really already legally a franchisor, they just don't know it, and they don't want to be a franchisor for a number of reasons? They don't have an FDD, for example. How often does that happen, if at all, where people are actually in violation of the franchise rule?
I would say at least 2 or 3 times a year where someone is saying they want to say they're franchise-like, and they use that term licensing agreement. And I always try to point them in the direction of the International Franchise Association, who is going to educate them and provide them with knowledge and information, and to good franchise attorneys so that they can get themselves in a good position. Because
there are people who just don't realize they are violating the franchise rule in the United States, and the consequences are tremendous. Oftentimes, I find this myself several times a year, that somebody will come to the Titus Center, and I have to explain to them, you need to move fast to get protection for this, and IFA certainly can help. Okay, back on track here. Not that I've been off track, but you give me lots of sidebars that we can get into. How do buyers, if you're a buyer, and you want to evaluate a restaurant franchise, some people are going to try to do that on their own, and they're probably not going to do it the right way unless they have that expertise because they came up through the family and they know. But most buyers, that's not the scenario. So what are they doing? Are they doing it right? Are they doing it wrong? Where do you get them back on track?
So, one thing is that we have, over the 25 years we've existed, have written so many articles about how to be an effective buyer. Our book, Appetite for Acquisition, is written from the buyer's perspective, from start to finish. What does a buyer who has an appetite to acquire a store need to know and understand in order to evaluate it? But in our brand, and we are a franchise brand ourselves, something that people forget about, we sell restaurants. Our certified restaurant brokers will sit down with anyone and have as many conversations as they need to help them evaluate. We also put out documents. We have a document called our business analysis tool. So when we provide you with a document on a listing, we say, okay, this is the food cost, but this is the industry average. So if they're running 40% food cost and the industry average for this type of low protein offering is 30%, then that's where the opportunity is. If they're running 14% occupancy cost and we say you should be between 8 and 10, you can see where the opportunity is to be better than the current operator. And you can also see in a very, very well-performing store, you don't have much margin for error for it to produce the same thing. But you have to look backwards and understand where they were in history, what they've produced year over year. And that's the benefit of a resale. You're not starting from scratch. You're not saying, I have this idea that this new concept sitting over here on this street in America will do well. You have the benefit of hindsight, and those numbers are important. At the end of the day, don't fall in love until you've done the math. The math is where the money, rubber hits the road.
Yeah. What are the 2 to 3 most common mistakes that franchise buyers are making today?
The number one mistake franchise buyers are making today is using ChatGPT or another AI model as their attorney or their advocate or their counselor. I mean, I'm receiving letters of intent that are clearly created by AI, and I'm just trying to really help people to push them back towards a real legal resource and not something you can get for free online. Because generally, you get what you pay for when you get something free online. So that's the number one mistake. And then the second mistake is leading with their heart, buying a restaurant because they love the food and they love the ambiance and they love everything about it, without doing the quantitative analysis to understand what's the opportunity today and what does that look like in a model for the future. And then just being intimidated, to ask the right questions. Just ask someone, just say, listen, most people, you may buy 25, you may go and buy 25 cars in your lifetime. You may only buy one restaurant. Go to someone and say, can you help me? I mean, in our case, there are no fees associated with giving as much knowledge and information as we can. And we want our buyers to have as many options in front of them as possible, have as much detail and understanding as possible. So get someone to work with you, but make sure it's a human, not an AI tool.
Do I have to love the food to buy the restaurant?
Absolutely not. I prefer that you don't love the food, right? I mean, it really does come down to the numbers.
So another question I have, actually I want to go back to something else. So you and Eric decided to form We Sell Restaurants 25 years ago, I think you said. Mm-hmm. So it's been a while. So you took a niche and niched it even further, because there are multiple industries in franchising, and you took one, restaurants, and you decided to focus just on selling restaurants rather than we sell franchises. Mm-hmm. And we've got hundreds of people who are brokers who are selling franchises. When 25 years ago, about the time the broker industry itself was coming into reality, did you consider, well, let's sell all franchises, let's just don't niche it down to restaurants? And was that a concern that it might be too narrow, the opportunity wasn't as great?
Absolutely. I mean, and I cannot tell you the pushback that we received and the kind of discipline we had to have within ourselves to say we're going to stay true to this single mantra. But we came out with a vision to sell more restaurants than anyone else, period. And you can't do that if you morph over here and there and say, oh, well, there's this great car wash opportunity and here's a great, beauty, wellness kind of a business. Yeah. You really had to have the discipline. And it's been absolutely the best possible thing we can do, because it's given us so much market share nationwide. I mean, we are selling a tremendous number of all transactions that occur in America today, resales. We don't do any new franchise sales. And so while brokers are fighting for market share and trying to be a little bit of everything to everyone, we simply own that online digital space for restaurants. So if you look up, how do you buy a restaurant? How do you sell a restaurant? If you ask AI, who can assist me in buying or selling a restaurant? Our business model has delivered that result that says we absolutely own that community.
Congratulations for doing that. First of all, for having the vision. Secondly, for sticking with it, knowing that you're going to do it this way, not the conventional way. But let me go into this. When you started out, it was just the two of you selling restaurants. Did you have the vision at that time that, well, we could train brokers for We Sell Restaurants, so we don't have to be the only two who are actively selling? We could have 100 of us or 300 of us. Was that the vision?
In the beginning, it was simply Atlanta, which is where we started, needed a good restaurant broker. Mm-hmm. And from that, the market dictated the response to us, because all of a sudden Atlanta grew into the Southeast, which grew into, now we're going farther west, and people came to us for this expertise that we had, rather than going and using someone locally who could sell a little bit of everything. They said, I'd rather have the person who knows everything about this business model. And we started, if you think about like a Century 21 or a real estate company, we were licensed as real estate people. So we did bring on agents for a while. And what we learned with agents is that we would train them, we would teach them, we dedicate all this time and share our experience with them, and they would just get bored and leave. And that was the genesis of saying, you know what, we're going to franchise this model, because once we franchise it, we're entering into a contractual relationship, and now we're sharing those trade secrets. You and I both understand what's happening, and as a franchisor, we can significantly control that situation, and that's how we morphed over time. So it wasn't an initial idea of let's be the largest restaurant brokerage firm in the nation. It was, let's do a good job at this. And the market said get bigger, and we got bigger. And then we said, how do we best service it? And that was in a franchise model.
And We Sell Restaurants has how many franchisees today?
So we service the entire country. We did about 110 million in sales last year, about 650 million listing inventory today. And we're still under that 75 unit mark in the franchise community. We've grown very slowly. It was interesting. We had Matt Haller at our conference, and I said to him, Matt, we were the definition of responsible franchising. We've never grown to be big, but our franchisees are extremely successful, and we do still operate. Our corporate headquarters does as much business as our franchisees do nationwide. So we still, from our home office in Palm Coast, Florida, we have an 8,000 square foot building here. We have restaurant sales professionals within the building that handle our corporate office. So if I don't have a franchisee in Poughkeepsie, then we would handle that for you. But if I do have a franchisee, I divert the business to them.
Who found franchising first, you or Eric?
Oh, I did. I love the idea.
Yeah, tell the story.
Yeah. So, it was just this whole situation with these agents who didn't have loyalty. And I said, the only way in which they're going to be loyal to us over time is if we can build a contractual relationship. And then we said, okay, let's go all in. And that was 2012. So, halfway into the genesis of where we are today, we said that's a better business model than continuing to try to have these agents. Because, an agent will go across town if somebody will give them a little bit better split. And I've just spent all this time and energy training you and sharing everything with you about our practice.
Mm-hmm. So did you begin 25 years ago with the idea that you were selling franchises, or you were selling restaurants? You didn't...
Selling restaurants. Doesn't matter to me if you're an independent or a franchise. But as we grew more and more sophisticated in what we were doing, we began to take on more and more franchises. They appreciated the fact. And then once we became a franchise ourselves, franchisors like doing business with franchisors. They know, we understand the law. We understand the positioning of their product. We understand what they do and what we do and where those two stop. They know that we understand the transfer process and that everything is subject to their consent. So as we've become more and more ingrained in the franchise industry as a franchisor and had a higher profile with the IFA and with other institutions, people come to us because franchisors want to work with other franchisors, and they say, help me with exit strategies for my franchisees.
So I have been teaching the A to Z's of buying a franchise for the International Franchise Expo and all of the regional MFV expos that used to be owned by the IFA, in fact, for many years. And when I got involved 35 years ago, it was very much an IFA activity. And I would teach on 2 days. It usually was a Friday, Saturday. Originally, the IFE was a 3-day. It started out in Washington, D.C., moved to New York City many years ago. But I would teach twice the A to Z's of buying a franchise. And I just did my 35th year this past May in New York City, taught my 69th and 70th seminar on the A to Z's of buying a franchise. And my point here is that 25 years ago, if I said to 100 people who I had in my classroom, how many of you here today at this expo are looking to buy a food or beverage franchise or a restaurant franchise? And out of 100 people in the room, 70 to 80 hands would go up. Everybody wanted to be in food. And of course, there was one particular brand in the submarine sandwich business that was extremely popular that people wanted to buy, and they were often there looking for that opportunity. Today, and for about the last 10 years, 100 people in my classroom. I did this in New York City just a few weeks ago. 100 people in the classroom. How many of you are going to buy a food or beverage or restaurant franchise? Maybe out of 100, maybe 10 hands now go up. Isn't that amazing that over this period of time, for one thing, franchising has expanded into all these different niches and categories and industries. And people don't understand that franchising isn't just McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. Even though that's great franchising, it's not only food. You can mow lawns and being in a franchise business. You can
sell restaurants and be in a franchise business.
Exactly. People don't understand that there are services that are provided. But how has that impacted your business? Are there fewer people looking to buy restaurants today?
So it's interesting because I think the parallel for us, John, is that the main two things have impacted restaurant, that what I believe to be that requirement to, hey, I want to be in the restaurant business. But the main one is just the cost of capital and the cost to build out a restaurant, right? So that sub shop 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were first teaching that class, that sub shop may have cost $150,000, $170,000 to build out from the ground up.
Yeah.
Today, that same sub shop may cost $500,000, and then you're still only selling sandwiches at $8.75. You can't recover your cost of capital unless you have these huge average unit volume locations. But my business is still trending. We've never had a negative year. We keep growing year over year over year, because what will happen to me is that person who's coming in and buying it isn't taking the hit that the first guy did. He's the one who's invested all the capital. I'm reselling it at a discounted value of the assets. So the guy who comes in second gets a great deal, and now he can make a lot of money on the transaction. He didn't burn up $800,000, $900,000 building it out. He may pay me or pay the seller $150,000 to $175,000, and the seller is going to take that loss because they came in and did it from the ground up. So resales are more popular than ever before. And then the second piece is that even if it's not a franchise, if it's an independent, what a lot of why restaurants are stalling right now is something we call in the industry SNO, that's sold but not open, that are sitting out there. And so we went through this period of time where not only interest rates were very high, the supply chain, like all kinds of things were impacting the restaurant business. But for landlords, because interest was high, they weren't putting shovels in the ground. They were not developing new spaces. So now we have these franchisors in the restaurant industry sitting there, and they can't get doors open. They can come to me and they can buy that pizza business that couldn't differentiate itself, that couldn't get off the ground. And all we've got to do is, you still need a hood, you still need a grease trap, you still need all the infrastructure that exists in a pizza business today, but you want to flip it over into a barbecue wing concept. Easy enough to do. It's paint, sign, strip out the front of the house, put in the trade dress, and you can do it for $150,000 instead of doing it for $750,000 to $800,000.
Yeah, good points. So if I came to you and I said, Robin, I want to buy a food, I want to buy a restaurant, but I want to buy a winner. And you know the winners, and again, I'm not looking for a brand to buy, but is there a certain food, and I realize it might only be good for 5 years, might be trendy, might be 10 years, things are going to change. Would you say, John, this one never loses? Here's the one. This is the food to be in. This is the type of restaurant to be in. Buy one of these.
Oh my goodness, I wouldn't do that. I couldn't say this is the kind of food. What I would say is fundamentally, this is what I would be looking for. I would be looking for a restaurant where sales are a minimum of $1 million. Because you get to a certain place where you can cover expenses at that $1 million level. I would be saying, in addition to that, I am going to want their occupancy cost to be no more than $100,000. I want to see a good lease locked in. They're doing $1 million, and occupancy cost is no more than $100,000 a year. Outside of that, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's barbecue. I don't care if it's sub shop. I don't care if it's Chinese. It doesn't matter what it is, because everything else is within your control. Now you control food costs. You control labor. Everything else is a variable cost, and you can make money in that scenario, but it doesn't matter what the food is.
People often talk about multiples, and they'll say, well, you can get 3 times whatever when you sell this restaurant. Does it work that way in the restaurant industry?
It does. Yeah, we deal very specifically with multiples. Now, because we actually sell more restaurants than anyone else in the country, we're able to get very, very specific about multiples. We use our own database. We use transactional data that we get online, actually build it into the back end of our technology that can get very, very close to exactly what your selling price will be based on listing with us. So, and we sell within 95% of listing price. So we can tell you what your business is worth, and we can get you that number at the closing table.
So that leads to my last question. Since, I want to get the best multiple when I sell, which food should I be selling? What product should I be selling if I want to get the best multiple in 20 years?
And I know you keep trying to back me into what is the food, but it's really not the food. It's the location, and it's the sales, and it's an occupancy cost that doesn't choke your profitability out of the business. And in some instances, that can be a coffee shop, believe it or not, with an AUV of only $4.80 if you get the volume that you need out of that location. So, foods can come and go. But if you can establish the overall volume of the location, you've got an occupancy cost that doesn't choke you out, then you can make money. And I think that's what people continue to see in this business. You deliver a good product, you can still make money. It's not you're not into a situation where food costs and occupancy have overcome the ability. You've got people who've made bad decisions, and once someone new comes in, begins to operate, they can turn that around.
My guest has been Robin Gagnon. She is a co-founder and CEO of We Sell Restaurants, a franchise itself, and has done a fabulous job, she and her husband, of creating that brand and promoting the brand and helping many, many, many people every year get into the restaurant industry. Robin, thanks for the time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.